Yes, thank y'all all for joining me this evening. I hope today has found you well, and I am so excited that you have taken the time out of your busy day, your busy practice, to come join us as we talk about the exciting subject of space maintainers. All right. But what gets me really excited about these space maintainers is a few things that I'm going to share with you. And so let's first start off with kind of who am I? Okay. First off, I'm a dad. Okay. If I haven't got the pleasure to meet y'all, I want you to feel who I am and how I practice and where I practice. So these are the reasons I practice right there. These are my four kiddos. My oldest one is Birdie Bell. She's 10. Our oldest son is Dodson Powell. He's 8. Little Emerson has wreaked havoc in kindergarten this last year, and bless them in first grade as he moves on to that. And then our youngest one holding down the fort, this picture of her on the right, sticking out her tongue, about serves Goldie Sue. All right, that's her name, sweet little Goldie Sue. So those are my four, and the Queen of Chaos is my wife, Rachel. All right. We live out in East Texas, so we're about an hour and a half east of Dallas. So where the grassland prairies meets the piney woods. I always like to say we're where the South begins, or maybe where the South ends. We live on a ranch, and this is one of our beloved livestock out there. Her name is Muna. She doesn't know she's a cow. She thinks she's more of a dog. Welcome to Texas. When we're not at the farm or hanging out at the office, my wife drank all the Disney punch. She just turned the punch bowl up and drank it all. And so we're always scheming for ways to go to Disney. I always like to say with four children, you're not welcomed anywhere but other than Disney. Not even Walmart wants you to come. And so we always like to go and hang out and have a good time at Disney. We actually just came back from a cruise. So that was a fun little summer getaway, and the four kids, we all survived. So it was touch and go, but we made it. I did my dental school at Mother Baylor in Dallas. Okay. I always love this picture because the buddy I'm with here, this is us on injection day, and you'll look really close at the vial there, and you're gonna see that there's blood in that. That's on our first injection. He hit my IA nerve vessel and all that all at one shot, and now he's an orthodontist, so he does not have to give injections anymore. I saved the world, okay, from that. I did my residency at Mother Baylor. Again, I'm inbred. Okay, I just stayed for a second round, guys. I had the privilege of being able to go to what is now Texas A&M Dental School. But back in the day, it was Mother Baylor, and I had a wonderful group of residents. We're a large residency there, and there were 11 of us in my residency class that have spread all over the nation. And so here's just a few wonderful people that are near and dear to my heart. I'm a board certified pediatric dentist. And this is a picture of Laurie Johnson and I. She's the past president of the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry. We were both teaching a course. She was doing a New Smiles course at the ski meeting in Vail, and I was doing a laser course the next day. And it was during COVID time, so we all had to mask up. So I love this picture because it just resonates from a hopefully bygone era. I'm the past board member, past executive board member for the Southwestern Society of Pediatric Dentistry. And so I'm really involved on the AAPD level or organized dentistry level. And I love my Southwest Society members there. And we put on an awesome ski meeting every year. So this next year, it's going to be in Jackson Hole, Wyoming at the beginning of February. Registration's open. You should check it out. It's family friendly and it's fun every time, right? Um, I'm also a Harris Fellow, so I had the opportunity while in residency to work on a large project for the Academy, and I did my Harris Fellowship project with advocacy and advocating for the children across the nation. And my chair for that was the late, great Dr. Susie Zeal. I was one of her last big projects before she unfortunately passed away, but that will always be a jewel in my crown to have worked alongside her and been a protege of hers. Through her, I developed a passion for education and for teaching and to see how doors can be open that you thought just might always remain closed. And a lot of that is through education, through things just like this. And one of the big takeaways I learned from Mother Baylor was through CE classes and things we attend. If you take away one thing from that, just one thing this evening from our time together, careers are made up of one thing at a time. We don't have to take away a full 45 minutes of soaking it on all it in, but just one thing at a time builds a career. And so, my hope for you is that you will be able to learn one thing that will help the children in your area be better. I'm in private practice, so I'm a private practitioner. I'm in East Texas. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. Literally, there are like 3,000 people in the town where I practice. There's like 20,000 in the entire county that I'm in. There's not even a pediatrician where I practice out here. And so, right down the road from me, literally about a mile away, there is a huge kind of festival called Yesterland Farms that opens up during the different seasons, and they have what's called a cavity creator mounted on the back of this truck. It's literally a giant gun that shoots out candy. And that's literally one exit away from me. Welcome to Texas. It's a big gun that shoots out stuff. And I know different parts of the country and different parts of the world, you're fighting different things, but here in East Texas, we're fighting Dr. Pepper and we're fighting candy. And so it is true to the source. All right, guys. So that's where we are. So back to the roots of my people here. This is my team. We are nobody in private practice without our team. And so this is my wonderful team that makes all the magic happen and makes me glow and look great every single day. And so I love to give them a shout out there because they make us all who we are. I have a passion for teaching and sharing for what successes I have and not successes I have in my private practice with working with my kids. I always say I live in the middle of a pasture in the middle of East Texas. If I can do it, you can do it. Okay. I put on my pants legs one leg at a time, just like you. I'm different. There's nothing unique about me. I'm just here to share with you my passions. And what I see is helping my kiddos in my private practice. And I've had the great opportunity of lecturing in large groups such as AAPD. I was at Denver this last year. I've lectured 3 or 4 times in large courses at AAPD. I've lectured at the Greater New York meeting. I've lectured many times at the Southwest Dental Conference. I'll be there again this next year. I've done multiple webinars. Perhaps I've seen you before. I've done hands-on classes, private practice, private office trainings and things. And so I really just have a passion for being able to share with you the things that I'm seeing that are innovative, that are successful, and that are going to help move our profession forward. And that's where I love this product. Okay. And so let's kind of get down to the nitty gritty here. Okay. So, kind of what exactly are we going to talk about? This thing that's a universal chairside space maintainer. What does that mean? Okay. We'll talk about that. And why is this maybe better than the other space maintainers that you've utilized before, or maybe you tried and you didn't like? Okay. What are some frustrating things about those that maybe have been improved now? Okay. And then I want you to understand how to confidently make it where it's successful for both you and successful for your practice. In my book, for it to be successful in private practice, it has to be a success for the patient first and foremost. It has to be a success for me, the practitioner, and it has to be a success for the practice as a whole. Okay. So I call that a win win win. All right. And this is a win win win. So, what exactly is a space maintainer? So, let's go back to the roots here. Okay. So basically, this is a thing that we're going to glue in the mouth to help hold the space. As we can see here in the x-ray, we've had the early loss of a primary molar, and so that premolar is not going to erupt in for several more years. If we don't hold the space in there, we're going to have premature arch loss, and that molar is going to shift forward. And so by putting a device in there that helps hold that first permanent molar back in its spot, we're going to save the place for the eruption of that premolar, okay? So why is this space important? As we said, you can get what they call mesial drifting, okay? And so this is just a kind of image here of where that molar is shifting forward. This will cost thousands of dollars in orthodontics to redirect that molar and to tip it back up and correct that, okay? In my land of East Texas, rural America, my patients can't always afford orthodontics, and things like that can be something that's not attainable. But me maintaining these spaces for them is a lot of times something that's a covered benefit for them under their insurance, or is something that they can reasonably afford that can help maintain a healthy occlusion and hold that space for that permanent tooth. So this is a huge significance for the patient as we're trying to develop and control the growth and development of their mouth when they're having unfortunate losses of those teeth early, okay? And so once again, what we're looking at here in this image is a chairside space maintainer. So this is a universal one that is made chairside, it's fabricated, and it is glued in right there. And it's going to hold the space until that permanent tooth comes in. So we can see right here, this patient's returned for a recall, and bada bing, bada boom, here's what we've been waiting for. That premolar has grown on in, so we just pop off that space maintainer with a band remover and we move on, okay? So that is the success, that is the goal, that is what we are trying to help develop, create, and maintain for these patients, okay? Let's kind of walk through some issues that you may have that may lead you to have the early loss of these molars, okay? One is obviously caries, okay? In my world, as we mentioned, I have a cavity creator gun right down the road, and that is something that is a battle in our area is candy, okay? Lots of dietary sugars, such as sweet teas, Dr. Peppers, all sorts of juices and things like that, just from that being a part of our culture of where I practice and where I live. And those are obviously very high risk cavity causers. Infections to the teeth, trauma to the teeth, okay, or ectopic eruption. So if you'll look at this upper right, you'll notice that we're missing the distal root of that molar. So actually, that was ectopic eruption that did increase, okay, as we were noticing the eruption. So it made it around that and it came on in, but we still ended up with cavities on the mesial. So that tooth just needed to be removed, okay? We've got a tooth down here on the lower x-ray where we've got secondary caries underneath that composite there that is to the nerve of the tooth. We've got a furcation abscess going on, and that tooth is not successful. So once again, we're getting caries and an infection that are leading us to the early loss of that tooth, okay? So what happens if we're not getting this area maintained, okay? As we talked about kind of that mesial tip, okay? But we can also have rotation of those teeth back there so the molars can spin around, okay? It can cause the patient to have different movements in their bite as a whole, okay? Definitely an unfavorable molar relationship. So even though we may have some space maintenance if we're not able to maintain the full amount of the space and we get some space loss, the molars still may be in an unfavorable position there that need to be adjusted. So the more space that we can maintain in these areas, the sooner we can get the space maintainer in, the better outcome we can have for the patient. Okay? There's different types of these space maintainers, okay? Your traditional one that we'd be thinking about for a one tooth that is lost would be your unilateral one. Then that just goes on one side, and that's what we can see here in this top image. There's also bilateral space maintainers, like a lower lingual holding arch, which you're seeing down in the lower picture, or an upper maxillary bilateral space maintainer, like a Nance or a transpalatal expander or a transpalatal holding arch, something like that, where it would go across and hold on to the molars back there in the back. And those can come in fixed varieties and they can come in chairside fabricated varieties. And so what we're going to dive into is kind of the differences between these band and loops or these unilateral ones. And so there's different types of these. We've got the traditional custom-made lab-fabricated space maintainers, which have been your tried and true kind of long-term, kind of old school, if you want to call it that, space maintainers there. But we have these newer ones that have come on the market that have been on the market for quite some time that are ones that you fabricate chairside. So in just one appointment, you take the tooth out, you fabricate these chairside, you glue them in, and you're done, okay? New Smiles has come up with the universal one. There's also ones on the market from De Novo, from NOAC, and from SML, okay? And so we'll dive into some of the differences between those as well, okay? So let's take a look here and kind of what we're looking at from a lab fabricated space maintainer, okay? You first obviously have to extract the tooth or deal with the area that has a missing tooth in there. You have to take an impression of the area or the entire arch. You have to do that with either your good old alginate or compound impression, or nowadays you can use a scanner. New Smiles is just partnered with a new scanner system too that I got to play with at AAPD this year. If you were there and got to see it, it was pretty awesome. And so it's different than kind of your other iTero scanners, and there are definitely webinars that they have on those. So if you're interested in kind of scanning technology and how that can work into your private practice, this is definitely one of those indications where, if you were making custom appliances and things like that, then a scanner would be very helpful. Okay. For these, you have to have the model made because you have to send this off to the dental lab to have this custom made. Takes a couple of weeks, and then the patient has to return to come back to have that glued on. Okay. One of the big pros to having a custom space maintainer, or these lab fabricated ones, is that it did have a custom fit to it. Okay. And that you had a very strong weld between the band and the loop there. So those were some of the glowing things about that. One of the big downfalls is that the cost of these lab fabricated space maintainers, they're definitely a lot more expensive than the chairside ones are. Okay. The postage you have to pay to mail it there and back. So that's an additional cost. In addition to that, there's also the chair time that it takes. This is a big thing in private practice. Time in the chair is time that the patient is not cooperating or has to cooperate for, where time in the chair is money for us too. Okay. The longer that we have to have the staff member with them, or the staff member working with them, from taking a scan or making a mold to pouring it up to writing up the script to sending off that to getting it back, from the front desk having to call to schedule, all of those things are effort, time, and energy that are additional costs that go in with appliances that have to be custom made from the lab and delivered. Okay. Not to mention that the patient has to come back and miss another day of school, and the parent has to take off another day of work. We don't always think about what that looks like from the barriers for the patient and the parent, but an additional appointment can mean another day of PTO for the parent that parent may have to take. And that may be something that they just can't afford. We're trying to orchestrate transportation. In my world, we have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins and grandmas and things that are shuffling these kids around too. And so for the parent to try to orchestrate that, that can be a big barrier of care. And so the more we can get done in one visit while that patient is doing well and is already present in the office, that is a huge benefit to both the patient and the parent. So once again, that's another win-win-win. It's a win for the patient, it's a win for you, the provider, and it's a win for the office as a whole. It just makes it easier on everyone in the office if we can have these custom made and fabricated chairside. Now, if it's not easy, it's not easy for the doctor. If it's complicated, that's not easy for the doctor or the team. And so we have to make sure this works in an efficient manner, okay, and that it's done well. You also have to ask yourself too about cooperation. Sometimes the kid can sit there for an extraction, or sit there for a crown, or sit there for fitting and things. But then do you have to bring them back without nitrous, or do you have to bring them back with nitrous? Those are different things you have to play out for the delivery. Sometimes a delivery appointment can be really hard for the patient after they've had a tough extraction. Sometimes it can just be easier just to finish that appointment. So cooperation is something as pediatric dentists we always have in the forefront of our minds. And so just getting the job done all at once again, can be a huge win for that patient. Okay. So once again, for these chairside maintainers, we're going to be looking at extracting the tooth. Then we're going to fit a band over it. We're going to trim that band and trim the loop, and we're going to crimp the wire into the tube to hold it into place. We cement it in place, verify the fit, and you're done. This whole process should take less than 5 minutes start to finish, okay? And we're going to walk through this process, okay? We'll circle back to this in a minute. One of the big pros to these is that they are simple and they are quick, okay? The more simplistic we can make this, the more efficient we can make this, the easier this is for you and your team to do. not taking an impression is always a win. I don't know in your office, but in mine, none of my team members want to take an impression. We don't have a scanner in our office, but we do take alginate impressions when needed, and they are not a fan of having to do that. It's kind of rock, paper, scissors, who draws the short stick, okay? The less chair time, as we talked about, literally is one of the biggest things for me. I can do them in my IV sedation cases or take them to the OR and do them under general anesthesia. We don't have to make a mold and come back to do them. You can deliver these at the same time while that child is already sedated. Okay, what a huge benefit for that child not to have to make a mold of the mouth while they're asleep and have to have them come back for a second appointment. Okay, that is a huge, huge win for them that they can have it all done while they're asleep, wake up, and it doesn't add a ton to your anesthesia time either. So in an IV sedation world, normally those patients pay by minute intervals. So if this isn't taking an additional 20 minutes to do, then a lot of times it's not increasing the cost of the patient's family from the cost of anesthesia either. One of the cons is you have to adapt the occlusal of the band, okay? And so we'll talk through that, but you have to do a little bit of an adaptation, and that helps mold the top of it so that it custom fits around it, and then it won't slide down over the tooth and impede on the gingiva. And so I'll walk you through some tricks with that. The new Smiles one has paid a lot of attention to the weld, okay? And so it has a very strong laser weld on there so that we're not seeing an increase in kind of fracturing or breaking from the band and the loop where they're soldered together. That's one of the big things with a space maintainer is we have to make sure the solder is strong. And so that's definitely something that New Smiles has taken into consideration. Okay. One of the bigger differences here as well when we're looking at the cassettes, okay? On the left, this is what the new Smile cassette looks like. This is the one in my office. I got it loaded down with so many bands here because I like to have all my sizes handy, okay? So we normally keep it fully stocked with at least 4 bands of each size in case we need those. But what I want you to notice is that the one of the competitor on the right, we have a maxillary and a mandibular tray. Just like in your stainless steel crowns, you're going to have maxillaries and you're going to have mandibulars, or you have anteriors and you have posteriors. With these competitors, they have both upper and lower bands because they've been pre-adapted, pre-shaped to fit those teeth better. But does it fit better at the end of the day? Or are you still having to make adjustments? Okay. I'm still having to make adjustments. So just because it was a maxillary band doesn't mean that it's fitting any better for you. What I like is these universal ones that easily slide over the tooth and then I can adapt it myself, okay? What that also means from an ordering standpoint is that you're having to order twice as many products in the competitors, where when you've got one band that fits both tooth number B and tooth number S, well, then I didn't have to order a maxillary and a mandibular, okay? There's also just one width, okay? In the competitors, they have wide loops and narrow loops, okay? That is very confusing when you're asking your team member, can you hand me the loop? And they hand you the wire and it's too small. And you're like, no, that's narrow. I need the wide. And then they're trying to dig through to find the wide. Well, oh, they forgot to order the wide and all you have is narrow. Well, now you can't proceed, okay? Now we're stuck here. We don't have to worry about that. Or my least favorite too. Well, we've got the wide in the maxillary band section, but we've got the narrow loops over in the mandibular, and so we're having to dig through both the boxes to find that. Once again, it can be overwhelming for the staff as they're trying to organize, as they're trying to stock, and they're trying to refill these things. If we've got it all in one little tackle box, it makes it so much easier. It's just less stuff, less fuss, okay? Sign me up, all right? And so those are just a few of the things I love about these band designs is that it's one that fits all, both top and bottom, and it's one width size. It's not a narrow and it's not a wide, okay? The other thing I love about their band design is that it's shorter, okay? When I was using the competitors, you'll notice how long that tube is, okay? I was having to cut a lot of those because I was having patients with space loss, okay? They're having a giant hole and that distal of number B, and A's already had a little bit of space loss and shifted forward. And so it's too long. And so I'm having to take a 330 burr and cut the end off that tube, whittle out the middle of it so I can slide that wire into it. That is a hassle. It is annoying. There's like stuff flying everywhere. The bands get hot. It's really tedious. You're having to work really close. You don't have to do that with this, okay? With this one, it's already a lot shorter, but still long enough to hold the wire in and crimp it properly, okay? So it's a short, strong tube, okay? Less cutting like you had to do in the competitor world. I don't know about you, but that was something that really irked me, was having to cut those. It was just the nature of the beast, but the beast has changed for the better, okay? When we're looking at the wires, so the loops themselves, okay, we already mentioned the narrow versus the wide as being just half of what you needed. In the new Smile version, we've got a plane, which is a straight one, we've got a curved one, and we've got a distal shoe, okay? So just three options there. If you don't do distal shoes, you don't need the distal shoe, okay? You can just go with the plain loop and the curved loop, okay? In the competitor's world, we had a plain wire, we had a curved wire, we had a distal shoe, we had a dropped wire, we had wide plain wires, wide curved wires, wide dropped wires, and wide distal shoe options. That is 8 options in loops right there of those wires, where in the new Smile, you just have 2, okay? That is so much less stuff that your staff, your team, and you are having to worry about ordering, that you're worried about stocking, keeping up with, digging through those little trays to try to find the one that works, okay? You either say, I want a plain, or you say, I want a curve, and your team member hands it to you, okay? So much more efficient, okay? So much less cost because you're stocking less, okay? Let's dive in really close here and look at some of the differences in that curve of the loop, okay? So when we have this curved loop there, one of the really nice things about that is when you've got one that's kind of close to the gums and it slides up next to that canine, sometimes the plain wire will slide down and go into the gums or slide up and go over. So with these curved ones, they designed it where you can either turn it up or turn it down where it'll fit next to it. But sometimes in those competitors, the curve still went up too high, and then it slid up over that canine, or it slid down low below into the gums. So thus, it really wasn't as helpful as we were hoping. Okay, with the new Smile one, it's about 0.75 shorter in size. So that means the curve doesn't come up as high, it's tighter. And so that'll help you have it closer adapted to the gums without actually digging into the gums. So it can adapt to the distal of that and help guide the eruption and be more handy there, okay? This may be one of my favorite things about this right here. They just launched these after AAPD in Denver this year, and they came up to me while I was giving my talk and showed me these, and I about lost my mind because I thought these were the best things since sliced bread, okay? If you'll look at this, they've got a little lasered lines on here, okay? 1 millimeter increments, okay? Gone are the days where you're like, is this side longer? Is this side shorter? I'm gonna clip this, clip that. Oh, it doesn't fit. Oh, this is a little short. You can measure the thing because they're in millimeters. 1 millimeter. So I can take off 2 millimeters on this side and 2 millimeters over here. Or maybe I want this loop a little bit longer on this side, so I can take exactly 3 off of this side and 2 off of that side. Oh my gosh, this just made it so much easier. And guess what? All the new orders that are shipping out, this is standard. This is not another option where, oh, I'd like to have the ones with the laser markings. No, all of them are now laser markings, okay? All the new ones that they're producing now are all having these little marks on it, which makes it what? More efficient, more easy for you and for your team, okay? So this is another game-changing moment here. The brilliance of New Smiles to think about adding on these markings there. I give them kudos for being innovative, kudos for listening to what works well in private practice, okay? I also give them kudos because they made this cheaper too, okay? And so this is sounds wonderful, sounds too good to be true, okay? A universal band that'll fit the top and bottom, less trimming of that tube, more precise trimming of the loop, less stuff to have to order, and guess what? It costs you less, okay? I call that once again a win-win-win. That's a win for your patient, that's a win for you, the doctor, and this is a win for the office because it's not costing you so much more to be able to integrate this new technology into your practice when you already have something existing in there. When you find a better way, you do a better way. Okay. Dr. Maya Angelou teaches us that you do the best you can till you can do better. When you know better, you do better. This is better. Okay. Let's walk step by step through the universal space maintainer here. Okay. Step one, you got to extract the tooth. Okay. Um, so this is your technical traditional armamentarium here. Okay. Um, one of the things here in this that I no longer use, okay, is that traditional injection syringe. Okay. For me, what I use now is the sew-in. All right. If you have not used the sew-in, you need to go watch a webinar over the sew-in and let that blow your mind. Okay. The sew-in is an auto injector, so kind of one that just will make it where you do a like intraosseous injection where you can do it distal to that primary molar. It will numb up the tooth instantaneously. You extract the tooth. You don't have to wait. Okay. It doesn't numb up the whole face. It just numbs up right there at the tooth. It is wild. You literally just put it in. It's almost completely painless. Okay. It's wild. The first time we did an extraction like this, it blew my mind. My assistant looked at me and said, "What sort of voodoo came out of that wand?" It's like a magic wand, okay? That kid did so good. And I mean, literally, we did the injection through the little interosseous plate there. We put the periosteal around it. We elevated, I extracted, the whole tooth was out within literally 30 seconds after I gave the injection. You want to talk about another game changer, time efficiency. This is where you've got that little 3-year-old, the 4-year-old, where you're like, I only have 5 minutes to get this done. How am I going to give an injection, do an extraction, and get a space maintainer done on this kid when he'll only give me 5 minutes? Well, if you don't need 10 minutes of anesthesia, it's instantaneous. You take the tooth out in less than a minute, and you can make this space maintainer in less than 2 minutes. Guess what? You're under 4 minutes, and you have got this done. Okay. Once again, a win, win, win. A win for the patient, a win for you, the doctor, and a win for the office as a whole. Okay. So extracting the teeth is now something that is way different than it was 2 years ago. All right. Fitting the band, all right? One of the things you're going to notice with this is that you're going to fit the band a little differently because it's not already pre-curved a lot like they were before when you already have an upper and a lower. With this being universal, it's more of a square. And so you're going to make sure you fit it down over the bulge of the tooth, okay? So this tooth in particular has a pretty large buccal bulge. So you want to make sure that it slides down over the buccal bulge. And so you may have to go up a size larger than you thought you would need to, okay? But this has a good tight fit. It's not spinning all around. It fits nice and snug, but the top of it is very open. We're going to crimp that in just a minute. You'll notice with this short tube here, how much space we have here to actually fit a wire. That is so helpful. With the competitor, it would come out much farther, and then you may have to trim that annoying tube, okay? We're not having to do that, all right? Next, we're going to fit that loop in there, the wire in there. And so this is pre-trimmed, all right? And so you'll notice how it slides forward, okay? I used a plain wire here because it fit really nicely and snug against the flat side of this canine, okay? If it was really curved, you could use that curved wire in there. You'll notice that I still have a lot of spacing up here. I haven't crimped it yet, but I trimmed the wire with just your traditional wire clippers there and fit it in there, and it's a nice snug fit. It rests up completely against the tooth in front of it, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to crimp the tube and crimp the wire, okay? And crimp the band, excuse me. When you crimp this, do not crimp it next to the solder. Crimp it next to the end of the tube. That helps maintain the strength of the solder. I've heard from some people that you ended up with failure at the edge of it, and the main source of that is because you're crimping and bending way too close to that joint, okay? Crimp the end of it, not close to the band itself, okay? All right, so you'll see here where I'm holding it. This is where you want to crimp and hold it tight. That locks the wire in place and will keep it from sliding out. You'll see how I have crimped the occlusal of this. You can literally do that, honestly, with these little crimpers right here. You can do it with howell pliers, crown crimpers, anything like that. The same thing with crimping this. You can do that with little ortho wire clippers. You can do, or excuse me, crimpers. You can do it with the howell pliers. Any sort of little crimping device works totally fine to hold that into place, okay? Then you cement it on. I cement it on with 3M Reliac cement. That's the same thing as cement crowns on. And we just fill up the little around the edges. We fit it on there, and you'll notice how nicely this is adapted, okay? Do you see how the occlusal, I've bent it over? You can honestly also take a band pusher or a bite stick if you have it handy and push on it and adapt it, okay? Sometimes back here on the distal, where it makes this corner, sometimes it sticks up a little bit more and you really need to bend that in a little bit more. So pay attention to that too. A nice snug occlusal fit is going to help keep it from shifting up and down, around, and off, okay? So if you're seeing that this is sliding too far down and impinging on the gums, make sure that you're crimping the top of it. Once again, this is easily customizable, and those are just little tricks to watch out for there. In my private practice, this is something that I can easily dictate to my team members, okay? I can have them, so I can do the extraction, and then I step away and go do a check. They will custom fit the band, they will fit the wire, they will trim the wire, they will fit it into the loop, they'll crimp it, they'll crimp the top of the band, they'll cement it on, and I come back and I check it and make sure I like the fit of it, I like the position of it, and that it looks good. If I don't like it, I'll pop it off and I'll reposition it and glue it back on again. This is something that easily can be dictatable within most offices. In Texas, we have very stringent rules on what our assistants can and cannot do, but this would fall within something that would be dictatable as long as you are checking it here. And so just make sure that you're paying attention to what your state allows. But most states, the dental assistants and your staff auxiliary can do a lot of things more than what we can do here in Texas with our teams. And so this is something that even in Texas, your team members can do and do confidently and do well and do great. This is something that my dental assistant, that's my chairside kind of surgical assistant, she loves to do these. It's just something that's kind of fun for her. She likes to custom fit it. She likes for it to look good. Loves to be praised for them. And I have to come and compliment her on it. I have to come back and say, you did a good job with that. And so that's just something in a day where you have the opportunity to speak positivity into your staff members. That's something that's very rewarding for them. And this is a rewarding procedure, something that they can do that can help the child, and that is something that they can easily, effectively do that's not overly complicated to do because it's been made so mainstream and so simple there. Okay. To kind of summarize again, what we're looking at here is we're just taking away some of the great benefits of how space maintainers actually help a child, okay? And so you may or may not have been familiar with how these help, but once again, we're looking at the early loss of a molar and trying to keep that tooth from shifting around and preserving that space for that permanent tooth to come in all the way. And so we're going to leave this on till that permanent tooth comes in, or we've got two teeth and occlusion in the posterior, okay? We've also talked about how we've highlighted how chairside space maintainers reduce the amount of time in comparison to what it would take for a lab fabricated one. They're both cheaper in fabrication materials, and they're cheaper in chairside and effort there. We've highlighted for you also the difference between the New Smile Universal Chairside Space Maintainer and the other leading competitors on the market, with less bands that you need to order, less wires and loops that you need to order, the ease of placement of those, the shorter tube length on that, and then also my favorite of all, the laser marked wire 1 millimeter increments for easy trimming that can help make it so much easier for your team too as they're sizing that. Once again, simplicity, efficiency, well thought out design. Definitely an innovative thing that I am very excited for our profession. Okay. So that concludes our discussion for tonight. I love this last picture I leave you with because it's the end. It's the end of that spacer. It has done its job. It has done well. It has survived well. And this is an example of what a curved one looks like next to that canine there. This is my information, guys. Please feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions or need any help with anything. That is my direct email there. I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram. Sometimes that's an easier way to reach me. I run all of my social media accounts for my office here. So that is me on there that you are talking to, that you are reaching, and those are my cases that I'm posting. So if you've got questions, concerns, anything at all that I can help you with where you are to make it more successful for you and your patients, I am here for you guys. Okay. Thank y'all so much for hanging in there, and I'll turn it over to Preston for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Curtis. That was great. Enjoyed your presentation thoroughly. Excuse me. I'm from Texas too originally, right? Born and raised, small town, and the cavity cannon had me rolling. That's some Texas stuff right there.
It is. It
That's good
is.
stuff. And I'll see you in Jackson Hole. Hopefully, I'm trying to make sure that I can schedule pencil myself in to go to Jackson Hole. It's my favorite place to go. So
It's
it's
great.
so well, awesome. Looks like if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. It looks like we have a few coming in. Let's see. Right now, I have to crimp the band. Do you use a regular crimping plier like the one used for SSC, or is it some other plier?
Oh, geez, just use what you got right there. All right. Don't make it overly complicated. I'll use my SSC crimper if it's already out on the table, or they'll put it out for me to use it for that. If not, I'll use a Howell plier. Okay. A Howell plier can easily crimp and bend that as well. But you can also use a band pusher, okay, which is kind of like a bite stick, but it has like the handle of a elevator, okay? And so you can push it on with that and kind of adapt it with that. Or you can also just use a bite stick that you would use to seat a stainless steel crown, and you can use the bite stick to just put pressure and bend it. So there's multiple ways to adapt that and to crimp it to make sure it fits. But I always like to make sure I've got a nice fit and a good look to it before I cement it on. Okay. And my preferred way are the stainless steel crown crumpers.
Perfect. All right. Let's see if you have any other questions. Let's see. Nothing. That was the only one open for right now. Give it
Anything
another
else?
minute. If anyone else has questions, you can type it in the Q&A chat box at the bottom. So give it a minute or so. Let's see. Nope, here comes one. Um, Great lecture. Can you review how to decide between straight versus curved loops? I'm nervous about the loop bending into the gingiva.
Great question. Okay, let's look at this picture right here. Okay, oh, the one that we've got here on the screen. This is an example of a curved one. Okay, and a lot of times you put the curve going up, particularly at the back side of a canine here, because what it does is it helps keep it from bending down as far. It kind of helps hold up more. So when you've got ones where you're worried about the plain loop going downward, okay, then sometimes these curved ones can be really good. Let's think about it too. What if it's a really tall tooth and the band sits up really high and then that plain one sits up too close to the top and size ledge? You can actually use the curved one to come downward lower to meet the middle or the bottom 1/3 towards the gingiva, and it can actually rest lower so you get less of that potential movement of that through there. And so it's kind of just a playing with it to see which one you think and just looking at it, does this look like the plain loop will work well or does the curved one? I love a good plain band or plain loop, okay? Honestly, it is my favorite. And I don't get too worried about them going into the gingiva. Sometimes they do bend down just a little bit, but long as it's not bothering the patient and it's not causing any major like irritations in there, if it impedes a little bit on the gingiva, then that really doesn't cause any major problems. I always like to think about ortho and all the stuff they're doing over there. A little bit of gingival, pressure down there doesn't tend to make too much of an issue. When you remove it, it's done. Okay.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, we got a few rolling in now. So, what's the name of the injector you discussed? I'm
The
assuming that one.
sewing,
Yeah.
Okay. And that's also one that is available through New Smiles, ironically. And so they do have some wonderful lectures on that and some great hands-on training courses too. Sometimes I know as we integrate new technology, sometimes it's nice to have hands-on exposure and someone kind of walking you through that on a mannequin or in theory or even with your hands there. And so definitely that's something that at the New Smile Restore lectures and courses that they offer, or even at large events like at AAPD, you could have stopped by and played with the sewing and got to do some hands-on training with that. So if that was something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to the New Smiles team and they can get you more information on that. It has been a great thing for our office. It is not nearly as expensive as you think it'd be, and it was wonderful. Like it has been a game changer for us. We call it the Sloan in our office. We're gonna get out Sloan. We get
I had a office in Mississippi. They didn't know how to pronounce it, and they call it the Suan. And now that's what I
the
like it.
Suan. You know,
Suan.
we call it the Sloan.
Nice. Well, yeah, yeah. If you're interested in that, just reach out to news like Dr. Curtis said, newsmall.com, or just call us, and we'll be able to help you out for sure on giving you more information about the SOAN or Sleeper One. Next question we have is, would Keytac cement work as well instead of Reliax?
Should work fine. Should work fine.
Okay. Um, would a band pusher work for crimping post cementation instead of using a traditional crimper?
Yes, a band pusher would work, but you would want to adapt it before cementation, okay? You could use it as you are cementing it on there, but sometimes you're going to get extra cement expressed out, and then you may end up with voids around your band, and you may have to drop a little bit more cement in between. So I would recommend to crimp and adapt before cementation, just so you get a better adaptation and a better smoothness of your cement everywhere and you don't end up with potential voids by kind of pressing on it and adapting it once it is cemented. That's something that sometimes, trust me, I've done it and I've ended up with voids in there and then I had to come back and fill it in. So definitely I find it easier to adapt it pre-cementation and you can use that bite stick or band pusher to do that too.
Okay, great. How do you estimate the amount to cut off the loop ends, or is it just trial and error?
Oh, Alan. All right, that's a great question. Previously to them having markings on there, it was trial and error. You just had to guess. You held it in there and you're like, oh, does this seem to work? Crimp, crimp, try it in. Now with these markings, you can just hold that loop over there and be like, okay, I need to cut off this much and I'm going to cut that off. Try it in there. Done. Okay. With those laser markings, that has made this so much easier. Okay. Way less trial and error of, oh, doesn't fit, oh, doesn't fit, oh, doesn't fit, oh, too small. Okay, so we don't have as much of those issues.
Perfect. You mentioned that if two teeth are present in occlusion posterior to the missing tooth, a space maintainer is not indicated. I just want to make sure I got this right.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, buried within the literature of the AAPD and kind of the guidelines there and all, there are articles about if you've got two teeth in occlusion posterior to the space, you get left shifting. So, let's say if we've got tooth number B that is lost, and then tooth number A that is present, but we don't have tooth number 3 yet, then it would be indicated to do a space maintainer in the area. But do we have to leave that space maintainer on until the eruption of the premolar, or can we remove it once the eruption of the first molars come into place? And so if we've got two teeth in occlusion posterior to space, so if tooth number 3 and tooth number A are in occlusion posterior to space, you've just reduced the amount of shifting that you're going to have because you got friends. It's not lonely anymore. It doesn't drift forward looking for the group, okay? It's got a friend, a buddy back there to stay with. So A and 3 will stay together. So now you can remove the space maintainer if you'd like, okay? You can leave it on there if you'd like, but you're going to get a lot less shifting in spaces because you're not going to have the pressure of the eruption of that permanent tooth shifting it forward. They will be locked into place back there better. And so two teeth in occlusion posterior to space can indicate the removal of the space maintainer.
How often do you place distal shoes? Does it depend on cooperation?
It depends on cooperation. All right. I am not a lover of digital shoes because sometimes it feels like there's a knife stabbing them in the gum back there because it goes into the gum. I know some people absolutely love their distal shoes, but I find that it is very difficult in my patient population and that my kids complain about that. They hardly ever complain about the loop impinging on their gingiva. Okay, but they will complain about that distal shoe poking them back there, and then you have to come cut the distal shoe off once it comes in. And so, definitely they are doable. There are lovers of distal shoes and not so much. I'm just not the biggest fan of them. Okay, but this is a great system to utilize because you can easily make it, you can measure it with an x-ray, and you can verify it, crimp it, submit it, and be done. So this is a really great way of making a distal shoe.
I'm kind of going to piggyback on that question, Dr. Curtis. Are you trimming your distal shoes when you have to do it and also making the curve? I know Dr. Laree will take
Yes,
it. Yeah.
definitely. You can,
Yeah.
what's really nice too is that you can actually curve it to guide it upward too. So you can kind of bend it in and use it as a guide plane. So if it's already like shifted a little bit mesial, you can bend that and push it down below that into the extraction site to actually encourage the tooth to come up it as opposed to just already losing space. So you can use it as a guide plane basically too by trimming it and bending it. Totally. That's definitely doable.
Yeah, great. Do you see greater failure in bands luted to SSCs versus directly to teeth?
Great question. No. I haven't, but that's a really good question. Partially due to the adaptation, okay? And so the better you adapt it to the tooth and the better the fit is, the better you're going to see that success be. A lot of times the failure there is going to be from the cement just washing off or the kid biting on like hard things and putting extra pressure around there and stuff. But I have not seen a greater failure of that with an SSE versus a traditional tube? That's a really good question.
Do you ever bend the loop with a three prong plier?
I do. Okay. Sometimes to create the loop here as well, but sometimes it's really tight, or you just needed it to go down, or you needed to go up a little bit. You can easily bend this with a three-prong plier or a crimper and just put some pressure there. What I do want to mention is that you want to bend it away from the solder. Okay. The closer you put the pressure to the solder, the more likely it is that you may overcome the bond of that weld there and then cause a failure to that. I have not done that, but I am very conscious of that you need to do it in the middle or the end, not close to where the band is soldered. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like to piggyback. Yeah, like I said, the couple of the failures that we've seen on our end is usually right there when they're on the weld. So yeah. I am sometimes nervous when I see patients come back with a missing loop from a chairside space maintainer. Would you ever be concerned about a child swallowing or aspirating it?
Anytime that something goes down, there is always the concern of a potential like which tube did it go down? Did you aspirate it or did you swallow it there? I have not ever had one where the loop came off. Okay. So definitely you want to make sure that you have a nice tight adaptation of that where it's fitting up really close to the tooth, not far away. Okay. You don't want like a millimeter or so from touching it. You want it right there next to the tooth. You want it to fit tight and snug, like pressure would be great. Okay. Um, and then you really want to squeeze that and pull on it to make sure. So if you've got a really tightness there, that should help reduce it actually falling out for you.
Okay, perfect. What do you tell parents when they ask what happens when it falls off? Will my child swallow it?
That's a great question to ask too. Most of the time I say to parents, well, does your kid swallow pills? Most of these little children don't even swallow pills. So if they're not going to swallow a pill, they're going to struggle to want to swallow this too. The chances of them actually swallowing it would be like eating it. So if they were eating candy and they swallowed the piece of candy, well, they swallowed it and the candy. Okay. Like kids eat their teeth sometimes. Like I'm pretty sure as a kid, I ate one of my baby teeth. It just disappeared, and I'm like, oh, where'd it go? I ate the thing. So sometimes that just happens, you know. And so it would be a lot more difficult for them to actually aspirate it and inhale it in. It would be way more common for them to actually swallow it while eating like sticky foods. Okay. Once again, if you're getting these to come off that easily, then we need to make sure that we're using proper luting cements, okay, that have a nice strong bond. That may be a cement problem or it may be an adaptation problem. So we need to make sure that we are bending that over the area. But that would be a very low risk. And we always tell the parents that we don't eat sticky candies. We don't eat Starburst, Laffy Taffy gummy bears. We don't eat gummy fruit snacks with these on. You will not make it through a sleeve of Starburst without this coming off of there. I don't care how good it is. Okay. And so definitely those are things that we're voicing to the parents too.
Okay. Have you ever placed it on a permanent molar to save the space for both primary molars?
I have not spanned the width of two teeth. That would be a very long space maintainer and would have way more indications for bending and breaking of the loop and the solder wire. The weld is made for a single spanned space, not a double toothed space. So it would not be indicated in a two teeth space area. That would be an indication for a lower lingual holding arch or maxillary cross palatal, okay, like a Nance, okay? So if you had more than two teeth in the arch side that were missing, you would need to do a bilateral space maintainer, not a unilateral.
Okay. Got a few more. Let's see if we can squeeze in. Let's see. If the tube spans the space when the space loss, well, let me read that again. If the tube spans the space when the space is lost and you can't fit the wire, what do you do? And then the second part is how do you achieve hemostasis faster to make nice, neat area to place space maintainers when you want to place the same day?
Good questions. Okay. To answer your first question, that was a problem in tube size with the competitor. Okay. That's why New Smiles made it shorter. Okay. So that now it fits easier. What you had to do previously was to take a 330 burr and a high speed and cut the tube in half. Okay. So if this was the width and it was too long, you cut the tube in half with a 330 burr and cut it off. Very annoying. Okay. Takes you about 30 seconds to slice. So that's an extra minute. Then you had to go into the hole and you had to go ring around with a 330 burr to help slide the tube in there. Okay. You hardly ever, I have not had to do that once with the New Smile one. I do that all the time with the competitor. Okay. So that'll solve that issue right there. How do you achieve hemostasis? You don't necessarily have to achieve full hemostasis depending on what luting cement that you're using. Reliax will set in area that does have bleeding, spit, all of that. And so I don't need full hemostasis. Once I light cure it, and then I will blow water down into the extraction site to make sure that there's not any residual cement underneath there, and I'll clean up around it and verify the fit, and I'm done. So I don't need to have full hemostasis. I can have it actually be like abscessed hemorrhaging, and I can fit on a beautiful space maintainer. And a lot of that is due to the type of cement that you're going to be using. Okay.
Great. Can you bend the tubes buccally or lingually? For example, sometimes when I do the loop, do them the loop off center on the resting tooth.
Yes, so that is a great point. Yes. So what you can do is take a three-prong plier and kind of squeeze it and bend it, okay? Or you can kind of rotate it and shift it over a little bit more, okay? Definitely you can bend those over with a three-prong plier, okay? So that is definitely something that you can do there, or like with a crimper and kind of just pull it over. Definitely to put it back on center. That's definitely something that's doable with these. Good question.